All right, so I would like to introduce Holly McHugh with Mejuri, who's going to lead this silver panel. This is the first time that we have addressed responsible silver, and you will see why when you see some of the complexity of this topic. Yes, it is exciting. So I will turn it over to you, Holly.
Thank you. So excited to get to do this. Really just thankful to Chicago Responsible Jewelry Conference for letting us get to discuss this topic. I think it's really important and timely. My slides are not as pretty as Dr. Levin's, so I just want to start off by saying hers are going to be much more beautiful, but hopefully ours are really informative. So we wanted to start by sort of level setting with everyone because this is the first time we're talking about silver, and also people in the room are coming and online are coming from really different perspectives. So just wanted to highlight that there's a large uptick right now happening in news around silver. We're seeing tons and tons of headlines. So just a couple pages here to highlight some of the current challenges that we're seeing. I also want to just really quick remind everybody that we will have questions at the end, so don't forget to think about your questions. So I just wanted to share a couple of the themes that we're trying to get to today. Things like by the end of this, hopefully we're going to be able to better define our what is responsible for silver and what are some of the challenges to get there. Things like, where is silver actually responsible? Hopefully we find that out by the end of this. Hopefully our panelists will be able to help us. We will learn more about where silver is coming from just in the world in terms of raw materials as well as recycled. And then we'll move toward more responsible jewelry and how where silver is used also in other industries to just give us some insights and maybe where we might be able to collaborate across industries to get to hopefully more responsible silver. Thank you, Hoover and Strong, for providing this really pretty picture. So I just want to spend a little bit of time introducing our panelists. If you can each introduce yourselves and then also answer the question, how do you want to define responsible in the context of silver, or talk about what you're excited to bring to the subject? Torry, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Torry Hoover with Hoover and Strong. I'm fourth generation. We are mainly mill manufacturer, jewelry, and refiner, so we kind of touch all aspects. I've been in the recycling and artisanal movement for quite a while now, so I look forward to talking about it more.
And isn't it true that you worked your way up from intern to president?
I did.
Okay.
I actually, literally, my dad put me in charge of cleaning out this old storage room, and back then I was, $5 an hour, so I have.
Worked your way up to the top. How about you, Mark?
Is this on? Yes, it is. Hi, I'm Mark Hanna. I'm Chief Marketing Officer for Richline Group. We're part of Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, and he's just everything he's cracked up to be. Along the way, being the marketing guy, I decided to pick up sustainability so that I made sure I was telling the truth about what we were doing. So since then, this has really become something that I care about and I work more on than any other part of my business life. So I'm much less marketing now, much more responsible practices, and my contribution to the responsible silver discussion is my hair is going that direction.
Thanks for that, Mark. How about you, Will?
Hi, I'm Will. I'm lucky enough to be a first-generation silversmith and goldsmith, and I have a small company up in southern Vermont, WR Metal Arts, and we try to focus on sustainable sourcing as much as we can, and always try to push the envelope. For me, I think ethical or sustainable sourcing, responsible sourcing, has always been about transparency. And try to do a holistic approach of transparency of all the pieces within our products. But coming to these conferences more and more, I'm thinking there needs to be like a accountability or action piece of that, of how are we doing better, not just being transparent, but how do we do better how do we think about who we're impacting or what choices we make, how that impacts other people. And then even from today, what impact that has of our materials.
Thank you. So we're going to get some context out of the way first off. So we want to talk about voluntary standards, specifically ones that our panelists are using and why they're using them when they're making silver purchases. And we're going to talk about what's unique to silver mining and trade compared to the gold industry. So we're going to hand it over to Hanna to talk a bit about these standards.
I think probably the best place I could start for the audience is talk about some of the things that are happening at the highest level of organizations within the jewelry and precious metals industry. And by that I mean OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation, which is a United Nations-like organization with 37 member countries setting constantly new guides and new higher bars for industries, companies, and countries to step up their game in terms of human rights, social practices, and now the environment. So I think that purchasing silver requires all the same things we've talked about in purchasing gold lately. But those sound simplistic, they're not quite so simple. So we're starting with being a good global worldwide citizen. So you're starting with the ethics of everything you do. The specifics are really conflict minerals, of course, human rights, very much so, and more the environment. And those are all now becoming equally important in terms of looking at the cost of something. Because the cost of something now isn't just the cost of the product. The cost of something now is the cost of your reputation for bringing that product to the market, for paying attention to your supply chain, paying attention to the fair labor and the fair work that they get throughout your supply chain. And I think silver, as Holly said, silver's gotten a lot less attention. We've all, in this industry, we've all paid a lot of attention to gold over the last few years. And responsible gold is something that's probably on everyone's list or tick list somewhere. But responsible silver is equally important. And the parameters are somewhat different. I guess we'll all talk about that. Torry can talk about silver's not just coming out of just pure silver mining. Silver's coming out of extractions from all kinds of other, as a byproduct of many other things, which makes it more challenging and maybe a little bit more difficult. So I think that, I'll leave it at that. The process at the highest levels in this industry, I consider everything to start with OECD, I said, the Organization for Economic and Cooperation and Development. But next to that is the London Bullion Market Association, which is the worldwide, I guess I'll say governing body on precious metals throughout the entire world, based out of London. And they've really stepped up their game in terms of all the guidelines they put forth and the rules they put forth for refiners and manufacturers across the entire world. Well, 2 years ago, they added silver to this, and their latest guidance in precious metals has to do with the environmentally correct, ecologically correct, and of course, still human rights correct sourcing of silver. LBMA has really the authority of you're a good guy or you're a bad guy on refiners, which is something important to all of us in this room. I think that I can speak for myself. We start with getting most of our precious metals through refiners. We no longer start at banks like we used to. So we need those refiners to be pristine. We need those refiners to answer a lot of questions that we've had to answer on our own upstream in terms of ethics, and we count on it. And LBMA is sort of the sheriff to make sure all that happens with the good delivery list. So I think topside, there's a lot of good guidance. It's getting increasingly transparent, I think is the right word, even coming back to our own corporation. The SEC this year is adopting, probably you'll see by the spring of 2004, the SEC will have adopted guidelines, which include environmental guidelines, to be reported along with your P&L in terms of what you do as a company for the rest of the world. So I'll kind of leave it at that, Holly.
I guess I just want to add to this particular slide that we're kind of, and apologies to ARM, this should say craft standard, just for clarification. But on the left-hand side here, we're really talking about what's happening at the large-scale mine, and then on the right is really artisanal mined, smaller scale mines. And then obviously down to RJC. I guess my big question here is if our audience isn't part of one of these organizations or isn't participating in one of these organizations, what should they be looking for and from the level that they are buying from? Let's say they're buying from a supplier. Does it have to be RJC? If they're buying from a smelter, does it have to be LBMA Good Delivery? Can it be an RMI audit that you're getting from your supplier? What do you think, Mark?
No, of course. I think, first of all, you're in charge of your own fate. You're in charge of your own ethics. You have to sleep with yourself at night, and more and more, the consumer is going to tell you whether you're going to sleep good or not. So I think that comes first. As far as which organization, I wouldn't expect everyone to have to review and make sure they're getting good delivery gold out of LBMA, but there's a simple little phrase that became an organization called Know Your Supplier. It's Know Your Customer also, but it's Know Your Supplier. And that's really what it's all about. Make sure that at least one step up, you know who you're dealing with, you have an idea what they're doing, and maybe they're not working with any of these certification organizations yet either, but know it. Just be sure, be comfortable, be able to sleep at night with it, knowing that from an ethical point of view, you're doing everything you can to make sure that the products that you sell are ethical in every way, starting with human rights.
We'll come back to the ASM side of this in a second. Mark, I'm going to make you talk a little bit more about OECD. It's not the Mark Hanna show, I promise. We'll get to others. I apologize.
Yes, it is. Yeah. What were we talking about?
OECD.
OECD is based in Paris. It's a worldwide organization recognized by the majority of countries in this world as the goal-setting organization for the growth of not just economies, although sometimes it gets buttonholed into that position, but for the collaboration between countries for a better world. And from that comes their really, over the last 10 years, their absolute development of ethical processes and ethical directions for everyone that's part of the OECD. And a lot of the major organizations like RJC take their direction first and foremost from the OECD. That I'd recommend that you can probably do it on demand, but look at the annual OECD convention just to see the kind of topics that they're discussing, because they're somewhat like the world's guidance on ethical practices, not just in the precious metals industry, but in all industries. And following their lead has become very important because it's become a worldwide view. It's become a global view. And we need that as an industry. We are a global industry. So they're sort of the organization that says, be gooder. And that's kind of the message that we all get out of it. So we interpret our own way, and our organizations do. I know when I was on RJC board, we spent a great deal of time understanding specifically for the RJC mission what was coming from OECD that we could use. And so I look at it as the foremost organization.
Last one. One more, LBMA.
I talked a little bit about LBMA before. Pretty much every bank that has anything to do with precious metals reports to the LBMA. The LBMA has become more and more of a guidance-setting organization, again, for the globally. This isn't just for the U.S., it isn't just for our industry. The LBMA has put forth the original responsible gold guidance because they needed to audit and they needed to give credit properly to all the people that were one step down the supply chain from them and who got that gold bar next. And I think we all want to know the pedigree these days of what it is that we're making things out of. So LBMA really is probably from a point of view of value of the metals. Nobody in second place. The control and the guidance that LBMA sets over the industry, starting with banks and certainly through refiners. And I said I'm lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time with the LBMA people. They are very diligent that the value and therefore the reputation of precious metals be untarnished, and that it's quite inspiring to see an LBMA discussion in terms of what else can we do to make sure the precious metals are even more trusted in this industry. So those are the two main organizations. I said RGC and some of the RMI, which is Responsible Minerals Institute, which is more electronics than jewelry. All the other organizations that step down from them really do very much take their lead from LBMA.
So we are going to move on to another panelist here. So to talk a little bit about the ASM space, I wanted to know, Will, if you want to share some of your perspective, because we have a lot of challenges with, clearly we have a lot of different standards, a lot of different requirements. What's happening in the ASM space that maybe gives us some hope?
Yeah, there's some. Well, silver is there's a lot of cool things happening in the ASM space. Silver is a little trickier because it's definitely more in the shadows and not talked about or not as flashy as gold or some gemstones. Where to start? Sorry, what was the question again?
Do you want to share your perspective on the ASM space and some of the standards that are out there?
I think I think we need more of them. There's some. There's fair mind and craft, which is great, and fair trade. Although we have issues with that here in the U.S. So that's great, but I think silver is tricky because it's you have to mine so much more of it at a time to get the same value out. So the large scale mining, they do a lot of testing and they're drilling cores and pulling out samples and testing good deposits to basically know where to mine and get the good ratios of silver out of the material. Where at ASM, you don't have that. So it can just be challenging to kind of have the same profit margins and things like that. So I think we need the certifications, but then it's challenging around that sector.
Do you want to mention anything related to land rights?
I sure do.
Okay.
Thank you. I think land rights are another huge issue because LSM, in comparison with LSM is often done in conjunction with government or legalization or formalization, where ASM sometimes you don't have that. So there's lots of challenges with land rights. And that is also more nuanced because, Christina Miller Consulting did an awesome living room on this. But here in the U.S., we put a lot of value, or the legal system puts a lot of value on property. So there was land that wasn't being used, which was actually indigenous land, that they basically the government was like, you can mine this, or you can mine the land if it's not being used. Sorry if I'm paraphrasing here. But then, so miners would come and mine that land, but that also was indigenous land, so there's issues there. And then with large-scale mining as well, their ASM often creeps up around that and mines in similar places, which is pros and cons of that because there may be more rich silver deposits there, but then there's issues of competing for the for the mine sites and the materials.
Torry, do you want to talk a little bit about the definition of recycled as primarily a refiner and recycler? Talk at all about, how you feel about some of these standards and what you're working on related to standards as a refiner and recycler.
Sure. Actually, you want me to go over that slide first?
No, we'll do that next.
All right. So I can do a review of recycled silver. So we started down the road, actually, as 208 to come out with recycled gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. And what we, back then, all refiners were blending bullion along with scrap. So we really said, what would it need to get to 100% recycled? And at that point, we were probably in the 80 percentile. And so we changed our systems and did what we needed to do, and within a couple years, we're 100% recycled. The important lesson here is that we are going to talk about, because the biggest challenge with ASM silver and, frankly, gold is the cost that needs to be talked about, because that's really what's going to generate larger sales for both. So the important thing is that what we learned with recycled silver is, and we had the discussions, should we charge more for it or not? And we chose not, and do it just as a value added. So a jeweler can have their choice of buying silver from somebody else versus recycled. So that's an important note, really, for the ASM space.
Thank you.
Yep.
Wrong way. Yay. So just really quick, we want to talk about countries where silver's actually coming from. As you can see here, just this pie chart is just the top 10 off of the top 20 producing countries here. You can see Mexico, China, and Peru being more than 50% of what is being mined in terms of millions of ounces. Again, this is just to sort of level set us and to get us, all on the same page. This comes from the World Silver Study that came out this year. Highly recommend reading, actually. But I just want to also add that nearly every single mine, well, what is the percentage here? 72% here are multi-mineral mines. We know that almost every mine out there is a multi-mineral mine, but I just want to highlight that there's only 27.8% of these that are just primarily silver mines that we're working with, and we have a lot of challenges across the various types of mines. You notice a lot of these are not necessarily ones that would be something that the industry is necessarily looking at. We're not necessarily worried about a lead zinc mine. That's not where we would necessarily think we need to put our energy. But in fact, because so much silver is coming out of those, maybe we actually do. This is really where I want to get Torry's thoughts here. Just really quickly, recycled materials by source, if we're talking about where these recycled materials are coming from, we have a lot of, a lot of change happening. Photography is going down. Jewelry is that middle bar that seems to be kind of going up and then back down again. But what's not pictured here are things like photovoltaics. We'll get into that later. But Torry, I wonder if you had anything you wanted to add on this slide.
Yes, sure. Actually, if you would go back 2 slides, please. I want to point out one more. So right here, as Holly said, she showed the pie chart, but I just wanted to point out, you see 800 million ounces. That's the total silver mine, okay? Just to put that in perspective, gold mining is about 72 million ounces a year. So silver is over 10 times the amount. If you add up just South America, it's also 50%. So Mexico, Peru, etc., they're about 400,000 or 400 million ounces, and Mexico is also half that. So 800, 400, 200. Next slide. And this is very important, what Holly said, is addressing silver mining or artisanal mining is not addressing necessarily silver mines. So most of those silver mines are in South America, but the majority is in lead and zinc and copper, right? Byproduct, huge byproduct of copper, and they're producing much, much more, right? In the millions of tons, both copper and lead. That just happens to be a byproduct.
I also want to add this one in really quick, because if you look at this chart on the bottom, you see supply on the left-hand side, demand on the right. Notice that short little bar is the recycled piece, and the dark navy blue and the lime green are totals on this graph. So notice also that the demand actually has outpaced supply. Torry, you've learned a lot about sourcing recycled material and ASM material within, your current constraints. What are you able to share with folks here about silver and your precious metals more broadly related to this?
No, that's a great, actually, lead-in. That sums it up. Recycling is a part of the solution, and I've always said that. It's a good first step, but we do need to look at ASM silver and addressing it, because recycling is not the answer to gold mining or silver mining. It's just a part of the puzzle. So the mining needs to be addressed.
I guess I also want to add that in terms of how much silver the jewelry industry is buying, it's around 30% of what's being purchased, whereas in gold we're well over 50. So we also as an industry just don't have essentially as much leverage as we do in gold. Mark, I want to see if you can talk about your ability to trace material back to origin. I know you're able to do that with gold, but I'm curious what you're able to do on the silver side.
Yeah, starting probably about 2012, we put in significant trace and track systems. We were using a lot of blockchain technology then. We're using some blockchain now, but a lot of other ways to track and trace. And we start with, I guess maybe we started with the RJC chain of custody profile of what a chain of custody looked like. We adopted that to start with the mining where we could, or if not, the refiner, as I mentioned earlier, and take that and in gold, I'm talking about gold, trace that every bit of the way through our fabricating material facilities, through our factories, and eventually to a customer. And track and trace became a very standard operating procedure for us as a company in gold. We never did that in silver till a couple of years ago, where we've started to do that in silver. And really the path is very, very much the same. That what we thought was going to be much more difficult didn't turn out to be anything but pretty much the same process all the way through. So we do try to track and trace a large amount of our materials. Some of it we must. We make gold coins for the U.S. Mint. We have to be awfully pristine to report that. I'd also have to say that a lot of the larger customers in this country are now making it kind of code of the road to ask where your materials are coming from. And some in more detail than others. There are some that we have to put together very detailed track and trace spreadsheets with each purchase order that we receive from them. So this is real. I mean, it's not perfect by any means. We've struggled with the applicability of blockchain from a cost point of view and energy point of view and some other things. But we do believe in tracking and tracing and transparency for a large amount of our business. And now, I won't say we're anywhere close in terms of percentage of the products tracked in silver versus gold, but we have begun to track silver, and we do find it's pretty much the same process, the same path, and a lot of times the same people.
So we have a lot we can basically take what we've learned with gold and apply it to silver.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Will, we've shared a lot of detail here about both ASM and LSM. I wonder if you have anything you want to add as a wholesaler and a silversmith related to this.
Yeah, I think, well, so many things, but and sometimes I get lost in the higher level stuff. But I think as a smaller business or as a designer, we have a lot more agency over our purchases, which is really nice. We're not beholden to so many. I mean, we still have the standards, but we have less like systems and operations and supply chains we have to cater to, I guess. So I think it's an opportunity to really leverage that and have a lot more buying influence and power. Even though it might feel like we can't, I think we can, and we have more flexibility within that. I lost my thread there again.
Did you want to share anything about where your materials are coming from?
Thank you. Yes, and wholesaling. Yeah, so we, through these conferences and also discussions with awesome friends and colleagues at Tucson in different spaces, I feel like I decided to make the jump to use Fairmind Gold. And I wanted to kind of move my whole collection. It was actually after seeing River of Gold. I wanted to move my whole collection to Fairmind, which we started doing, and my amazing operations director was like, wait, can we make it in rose gold and palladium white gold? And I was like, sure, we'll figure it out. And then I wasn't able to buy that grain or have a casting house cast it in that. So that basically started a 1.5 to 2-year journey of, well, let's just do it ourselves. So we bought grain direct, or traced back to a mine, pure grain. We bought a 3D printer so we could cast all of our designs in wax and then cast it ourselves. And kind of through that process, it was like, wait, so I just have to buy the gold to be able to stamp it Fairmind. And it was like, what about the silver? And through talking to Fairmind and being connected with folks, it was like, oh, there is Fairmind silver as well. But there are no mines that purely mine silver. It's just a byproduct of the gold mining of the Fairmind mines. So often miners have some extra kilos or silver sitting around through the process that they're looking to sell. So I know Hoover and Strong sold some early on. So we were able to buy some. So all of our alloys that we now make in-house, or actually with collaboration with Mercury, use Fairmind silver, which is really amazing. And so we use Fairmind gold, and it's all ecological Fairmind gold, and then Fairmind silver. And that's either coming from ecological mines or mines that do not use mercury. So again, we have that kind of buying power where we can be more flexible and really have that granular sourcing on a small level, which can be really cool.
Thank you. So I want to sort of shift gears here to talk about how our audience can balance the various challenges in the silver industry. We've mentioned some about pricing. We've mentioned quite a bit about supply. We've talked about the various types of mines. Let's talk about some complexities that arise from various types of mines. So Will, very specifically, can you talk to us about the challenges that you're seeing in ASM mining, especially with around multi-mineral mines? What do you think this audience needs to know?
I think we should all be searching for it more and getting the algorithms going, because there's just not tons of information on ASM silver. Again, Christina Miller Consulting Agency was great about pulling together lots of information. And we really need to look at like these multi-mineral mines because that's where a lot of the material is coming from. And gold already gets a lot of attention, but it's good to think, okay, what else is being mined besides the gold there? The kind of other big thing we need to be cognizant of, and why the more I dived into this, the more clear it was that we need to have a stronger impact on silver in the industry, is silver is less dense than gold. So when in the small scale mining, when they extract so they go down in tunnels or find the ore, which is basically rocks. It's just rocks that have enough profitable material in there to call it ore. You break that up, and then you either heat it up and melt it down and add things to it to extract that metal, or you use cyanide and different chemicals on a larger scale. The problem with silver is it's less dense than gold, so if you're trying to get like 10 units of gold, you might pour in 10 units of mercury. It's like 50-50. With silver, you have to put in 70% or 70 parts mercury for 30 parts silver. So you're using a tremendous amount more mercury to get that alloy out, or that metal out. And then it's also, as you see all the charts, we're mining 10 times more silver for the demand than gold. So it's less efficient to extract it with mercury, and you're mining a lot more. You're mining in like pounds, not ounces or grams. So there's a tremendous amount more work, tremendous amount more impact on the environment, and a tremendous amount more mercury use as well. So I think we can have more impact in silver than in gold in many ways, but yet gold, there's a profit margin, so it's the initiatives it's easier to start there, but we can actually have more impact with silver.
Speaking of that price question, you're using only fair mined gold and silver, you said. Do you want to talk about your motivation there, or even how you're managing that price difference? Because there's a price difference.
Yeah, definitely. It really started, again, about a year and a half ago maybe, with talking to Dave and Alyssa at Mercurius and talking about, like, we want to do more of this. How do we do it? And talking to other designers and being like, we want to do more. And I think we've been able to absorb the cost some because we use a lot of the silver for alloys, so we're able to absorb that into the gold cost of alloying. So most of the fair mined silver we use goes into our alloys. Some goes to other independent jewelers and designers. What was the second part of that question?
That's a great question.
Oh, just price.
Price.
So we've been able to not see an impact of that silver price. We also, to be perfectly transparent, we don't do that much of pure silver collections or lines. But I think, again, it comes back to on a smaller scale, that's where we can actually, that impact won't hit us as hard as it does a larger manufacturer that's doing much larger volumes of silver. Because if I was going to make a silver ring at $5,000, it might be like $5 worth of silver. That could cost me $10 of silver if it's much more ethical. So that even if it is twice as much, like $50 an ounce, that cost is not going to hit the end consumer that hard. And in my opinion, our clients at least will definitely absorb that cost for the story and the impact that they can have.
The story makes a big difference, huh? Mark, I'm wondering if you can talk about your perspective in LSM. I know you're spending a lot of time evaluating the risks that you have, or the impacts you're having related to silver mining. Maybe you want to talk about how our audience can understand options for risk mitigation, maybe to learn from some of what you've learned.
I think I'm going to really segue a little bit from what Will was just talking about. That I'm on the board of mercury-free mining, and we had a very major breakthrough over the last month and a half with a new invention called Gold Drop, and we demonstrated it recently. There's a long ways to go, but it would be quite impactful for ASM in the sense that it's quite inexpensive to manage and operate, and it's quite efficient. So there is some hope in the mercury area. But to your question, that I may take this a little bit different direction, but because one of the things I'm seeing that I think you guys, if you don't know about, you should know, is that some of the large-scale mining, particularly through World Gold Council, have begun to work together with some of the smaller minings when it comes to energy and in sharing cooperatively renewable energy. And there was just a very large paper presented recently in London about this from the World Gold Council. So that's an encouraging factor. But I think specifically to your question, that most of the silver that we're we're bringing in. I said we're bringing in almost no silver directly from mines anymore. That we same process that we're working with gold, which is a combination of banks and refiners. However, we do get involved with some of the mines. On a large basis, you had Mexico very predominant in your chart. We work with Panelists, which is the largest silver miner in Mexico, on a number of projects. And then on the other side of that, that we're supporting their program, working with ASM in Mexico. I can't speak for any other country. So I think both at the World Gold Council level and at some of the mining levels, that you're seeing a cooperation, less a competition and a little bit more of a cooperation, or coopetition maybe we'll call it, between the larger and smaller mines. And the uniting factor to me seems to be energy. It seems to be that energy is the common enemy, and energy is the common cost. And bringing large and small together certainly going to have good benefits for us as an industry.
Torry, I wonder if you want to talk about price. I know there are pricing challenges, and maybe you can touch on the difficulty of selling with some of those premiums.
Definitely. I just want to add a note on the ASM silver. I would take the opposite. I would focus right there on primary silver. And as Mark said, I'd start in Mexico, South America. You're going to be fighting an uphill battle to change now the copper, lead, and the other industries. But the primary silver mines, many of, once you hit the top tier, large scale, there are medium mines that need basic improvement, of everything we've talked about.
Fortunately, there is a copper industry association that we can trust. I don't
Yep.
know if there is a lead zinc industry body. Anybody? Okay.
No. So the other part of the question was price. And that is really what we are focused on right now for both ASM gold and silver. I've been coming to these conferences now for quite a while, and everybody in this room is the audience buying ASM gold and silver. And when it comes down to price, you can cheer, make the rally cry, but gold is between 5 and 10% more than regular gold. So our mission is to drive the price down. If you could fix that, and there's a big, artisanal miners are not selling their gold at market prices. So there's room there to figure out that. And if you could sell artisanal mine gold and silver at the same price as or close to, think about the change there. Then it would be dramatic. Then you would overcome that price resistance. Silver is even worse. As Will said, it's double the price at the best case. It goes from 23 to $50 an ounce, and if you're bringing small quantities in, it can even be more than that. So the biggest challenge to take it beyond and make it meaningful. That's really where I'm looking, right? To make artisanal mined metals meaningful, jewelers have to start selling it in volume, right? With 4 million miners around the world. So that's what we're working on, really to drive that cost down, whether it's through direct sourcing, whether it's through buying from mines that may not be fair mine yet. I think Christina said it very well regarding gems. All you really want to do is make their lives better, right? Bring up basic safety standards. And then they can do with the money, buy a house. So we're on the same mission for really gold and silver. How to get that price down, because that's, at the end of the day, it's in the boutique, jewelers now, but it should be made by, jewelers all over. And I'll add to it, it's a perfect product for independent jewelers. And I know Mark doesn't want to hear this, but it's because, what makes an independent jeweler or goldsmith unique is the jewelry that they're buying that isn't mass produced. So to be able to add on that value add of Fairmine is the perfect thing for, I think, independent jewelers.
Yes, I'm thinking. I think slow.
We'll catch up.
I think just to add to what Torry was just saying, that the value add can be the ethics in the silver. The value add, because of the fact that we're as a mass producer, that's what we're going to produce. And if you can produce bespoke product, you can produce very, very specifically customized type design products. Then I think there's room for the costs of doing it the right way, and costs of the incremental premiums that Torry was talking about. I'm speaking for an industry I don't know that much about, but from the outside looking in, I believe that's part of the value add of the product, and it's a very important, appreciated value add of that product. And I think it should be able to do it, charge for it. We're certainly producing mass stuff not going to be in the way of that. That's for sure. So I do think that's an opportunity that Torry just mentioned.
So just sort of coming back to this supply and demand question, what can we, seeing here that jewelry, we're that very first bar on demand, that kind of deep purple. If you combine the two sort of pinkish ones, photovoltaics, electrical, electronics, those are much, much, much larger than, what we are purchasing as an industry. So what can we actually do to impact this silver industry? I'm curious, Torry, maybe we'll start with you, with where you're purchasing from. Can you talk about any opportunities maybe in impacting the industry across some of these? I know there are a lot of industry organizations. We were talking about the RMI earlier. If we could, collaborate across with electronics, what could we accomplish? I'd also love to talk about mandatory recycling, because it's not mandatory to recycle your photovoltaics. Call your senators. And there's a lot of silver in there, and we need it. But Torry, I'd love to get your thoughts on access to recycled silver.
Sure. And I'll address the solar panels also, as long as you brought it up. But let me add to what you just said. What's even worse about recycling cell panels, there's no federal mandates to recycle anything. Not paper, not plastic, not aluminum. Think about that. That's kind of sad.
Yeah. We see it usually happens that the EU does it first, and then California does it, and then sometime later federal does it, right? So how can we speed up that process?
Right. There's states that do it, but it is not. There is no federal recycle. I'll talk first about the solar. That's interesting. So solar panels have about 20 grams of silver in each panel, a little over half an ounce. And we're really at the beginning of it, right? So silver panels really are again, the volume is picking up on people putting solar panels on their roofs or wherever. And now we are beginning to recycle those. They're not even recycle them. Throw them in the dump. That's really what's happening. Only about 10% of solar panels are recycled today. And to put this in perspective, in 10 years, there will be $1 billion worth of silver dumped in the trash. $1 billion worth of silver in 10 years from.
Are we going to have to remine waste instead of remining tailings piles?
Well, the good news, though, is silver being a precious metal, somebody will figure out how to recycle it. Ironically, Hoover and Strong's in Virginia. At UVA, the solar panel industry has given UVA $250,000 to do to figure out how to recycle panels, and it's very interesting. Typically, if we were to take a solar panel, we would put nitric acid on it and dissolve the silver out. That's the traditional way to dissolve silver, different from the mines and mercury. They are using laser technology to produce nano silver. And I don't know if anybody knows about nano silver, but there's $1 billion worth of nano metal, precious metal sales. You know, all of your glass is tinted with, you know, silver is mostly used. So nano silver technology with the laser is a pretty cool way to recycle silver from panels. So hopefully they will perfect that. But that's a good example. So it will happen. Hopefully before all of those panels end up in the dump. So, and that's a big part of usage for silver, right? You already stated jewelry is a small part. I think how we can affect silver, I don't know about recycling, because there's plenty of silver out there to be recycled. I encourage the jewelry industry really to focus on the ASM piece, because it really has been untouched. When we were working with the ethical metalsmiths to bring in, you know, fair mine gold, that was done in Peru, Colombia, again, back to South America. The problem is you don't get much silver from gold mining, so it really is a different, totally different mission to look at ASM silver.
Thank you. Hey, Will, do you want to talk about what smaller jewelers can do to maximize influence? Maybe highlighting how independent jewelers maybe go more on your the ability to be nimble.
Yeah. I think we definitely have more of a ability to be nimble. And I think it's easy to fall into the same systems that we've been operating in, or other companies have, but I think we have an opportunity right now to really shake up the paradigm and the systems. And I think we can, you know, we don't have to go for low cost. We can pay a premium, and I don't think it's a premium. I think, you know, for that story, it's not, and I don't think that the miners should have to subsidize that for us. And there's a lot of small, awesome. I think there's a lot of potential. I know a lot of LSM mines are looking at tailing ponds tailings to kind of re-mine that for different minerals, and kind of, now that we have better technology, pull out better efficiency of the materials that are there. But I know there's a lot of cool kind of regenerative things, you know, happening in Alaska. There's a lot of states that have silver mining, and a lot of the states that had gold mining. After the gold mining came the silver mining. So like Nevada is the silver state, even though it's known for gold mining. So there's still a lot of material there that people are mining, and there's really cool stories that we can tell and help elevate other people's voices. But I think it takes a lot of courage to change a system. It takes a lot of listening to people who are in the field doing it and mining, and asking them what, you know, they think would be helpful. And then I think it's a lot of collaboration. And I think that's especially hard for us in the jewelry sector, because we don't want to share with the competition or over-compete or something. So it's been really amazing collaborating with Mercurius, and actually, you know, we are two brands that we might have a lot of clients that overlap, but what if we pause that for a second and collaborate and try to change it? And that's just really cool, and creates a lot of doors and openings and potential that we don't even know that impact yet.
Yeah, and 15, 20 years ago, the apparel industry was talking about how if we told anybody where our supply was coming from, we would we would lose our competitive edge. And I think jewelry is just now starting to get to that point. Why aren't we sharing where our supply chains are? I'm ready. Y'all ready? Okay. So we want to take some questions. Unless Mark, you had anything you wanted to add to that? Okay. We wanted to take some questions from the audience. I know we didn't give you much warning. Oh, great. We've already got 2. And of course, if there's anything coming in from the folks that are viewing.
I just want to add real quick before we get onto the slide. I jokingly tell people, about recycling. That's still up. Unfortunately, the silverware industry is supporting the jewelry industry recycling. How many young people have inherited their parents' silverware?
Yeah.
So we have melted down way too much beautiful silverware because of that. So.
Go ahead.
So I got a question related to something that, is it Torry? Torry, yes. Torry, that you were talking about. So the price of Fairmine gold is more than the price of gold.
Yes.
The price of Fairmine silver is almost double the price.
Correct.
And you were talking about getting the price down. Now, and this comes up a lot, and what I want to know, it confuses me because number one is if the price comes down to where they're the same, there's no incentive for people who are not fair mining gold to fair mine gold. And number two, if it's the right and ethical and proper thing to sell and this is the price, then this is the price. And the idea that it should sell for less because something that is less sells for less, in my mind, is nuts. So I don't know if there's a question there, but
No, that's a great question. And I should have brought that up. There is a gap there. When you're paying a miner $5 an hour isn't even it, $5 a day, and you can increase their wages $10. There's still a big gap there between what the cost of the miners is and $2,000 gold. That's where then you have. And yes, you can say all day long, because you're in this room, because you're the ones buying Fairmine gold. But again, if you want to sell it in volume, you have to get down that gap. That's 10% more right off the 5% is another $100 an ounce. 10% is $200. So that's on the pure gold standpoint before you've even turned it into product. So that's where we're working on. You should be able to bring in Fairmine gold at close to the same cost, and then you really have a value-added product at close or to the same price.
And off of that, I don't so a good ratio for silver is 40 points or 40 parts silver, or 40, I forget what it is, 40 tons, something. But basically, if you pick up 40 pounds or 80 pounds, let's say, of rock or of ore that is rich in silver, you smelt that down and get all your silver out of it. It's if you're lucky, a good deposit is 40 grams. So I just don't, with ASM, it's really hard to get that daily wage up. So it's that's why I think we have to have collaboration, and we have to have some other metric like gold subsidizing that silver. And I think $20 an ounce for silver is just too low to pay the miners.
I do have a question from the virtual audience. Dolores asks, given the references to Latin America, I wonder if there is any organized effort to coordinate with those countries' governments for responsible sourcing, LSM and ASM, particularly in Mexico and Peru.
The panelists all looked at each other.
Yeah, no, for gold, yes, but not for silver.
But not for silver.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. And maybe it's partly because of the price, right? We're back to that same challenge. If silver was more per ounce, we would probably get more interaction with governments. We need to make it worth everyone's while, which is a huge problem. I think it needs to be corrected.
And I think what's extremely important, back to your question, best practices doesn't necessarily mean it costs you more.
It shouldn't mean it costs you more, right? Like,
best practices doesn't mean that. You just have to change the way you think and work your systems. And right, you've experienced the same thing. Best practices doesn't necessarily mean more.
And I would also add, large-scale mining often has contracts with governments and has more of that connection with the governments. And this is totally just a Will paraphrasing here. But ASM often works with initiatives and nonprofits more, and it has less of a connection with the government directly in that way. So I think for ASM silver, we may have more luck sourcing through nonprofits and minor co-ops and organizations kind of on the ground. And right now we are trying to bring in 18 kilos of silver from a Fairmine mine. So if anyone's interested in Fairmine silver, we got to bring it to market. So talk to me.
yeah, we have another?
Hi, I'm Maddie. I'm an independent jeweler. Will, I'm actually interested in, my question is exactly about what you were just talking about. I guess years ago, bought a little bit of Fairmine silver from Hoover and Strong, but I haven't, over the last few years, I haven't been able to source it consistently from anyone. So my question was hopefully simple, just where can I actually, as a jeweler, buy ASM silver consistently?
If you hadn't added the consistency, I would say, or consistently, I would say talk to me. But yeah, I am not a large casting house, so I will not have like hundreds of ounces always on hand. But I think it's through collaboration and partnerships and kind of whittling down those walls or like the silos of us staying our own brand and kind of branching out and be like, hey, where do you get your silver? Or where's your supplier? Instead of keeping that all secret, which I think was the traditional model, I think we need to change that up and be like, hey, do you have any extra right now? Or like, can I buy some? And Fairmine is great, and I love supporting them, but my hope with buying Fairmine is also to create other initiatives. So, I mean, we have a lot of silver here in the U.S., so getting silver directly from Alaska or from Nevada or from California, from small-scale miners, I think that would be really cool, too. But then the challenges are there's not certifications necessarily for that yet. So I think it's relational transactions and collaboration.
And is the reason for this just simply price, that refiners aren't carrying this now because of its cost prohibitive?
No, the answer is consistency. Yeah, when we launched it, we sold a couple hundred ounces. We had more demand. Then we had to tell jewelers we'll get it in 3 to 4 months, and that, from a business standpoint, that's not a good model. So we just stopped selling it solely for consistent supply.
But as an independent jeweler, that can just be part of the story, I think, where it's like, yeah, we're sourcing this directly from mine. It may take some extra time, or I have this much right now. So that can be part of the conversation and kind of bringing the clients into that. So at least I have a lot of clients from the U.S. who are used to getting what they want at like right away and very quickly. So I think if we can help educate that these materials are coming, if you want it directly from mine, it is coming from the mine. So that may take some time, and just there's complexities with that.
Fantastic. Over there.
I see a lot of the same people here that I've seen at conferences for years. And the one thing that I rarely hear is anybody talking about the consumer. So here you're talking about higher prices and can we pay it or not. We have no one surveying the consumer that I know of and asking them what they believe and what sort of buzzwords we could use for them that would encourage them to go this direction. So unless we do that, we're all just talking to each other. So it's not a question, it's sort of a statement, sorry.
Well, and it's a really fair question because also as retailers, marking up silver in the same way that we do mark up gold? Are we getting the same margins from those products? Maybe we could, or maybe our consumer is willing to buy more or spend more if they're thinking of it as more of a precious metal, because we don't really treat it like a precious metal in our marketing.
I know, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, Christina Miller Consulting did a survey, and it was 20% is what that survey found, that people were willing to pay more for ethically sourced material. And I think that's going to just keep growing with the state of, on the regulation side, and just people wanting to be more, people are more carbon conscious now, are more sustainable business conscious now. So I think that number is just going to grow with the younger generations.
And I can say that as a retailer that's working for a company that's going for a much younger generation, it is absolutely expected. This responsible sourcing is not an option. They don't really care if we talk about it, frankly, because they just expect that it's already done. So I think it's just a really strong proof point that we can all use for why we should be spending a bit more on it.
And I would say one thing, Eric, I do appreciate your comment though, or question, because I think it is easy to get stuck in our own heads and get stuck in our own circles. And that's where I think, talking to the miners, talking to other owners, other designers, to hear what's working, and not just, kind of switching the conversation, and that, or what Pauline was saying about information passing. I think having that go upstream and downstream and lateral as well is really important.
Right. I'll add to the question. I mean, the jewelry industry has never been great at marketing jewelry to consumers as abroad, right? I mean, we're a small industry, but this is a great, Brilliant Earth is a good example of, yes, you can. And, the jewelry industry is still a fragmented industry, right? It still has 80% independent jewelers who can tell the story of Fairmind. You don't need a national campaign to tell the story. That's what makes it appealing for independent jewelers, in my mind.
And I might push a little bit more as well. Sorry, I'm on a roll now. But just as an independent jeweler, I can convert my whole line to Fairmind. I'm lucky enough to own my own business and have the privilege of doing that, and a supportive team that is ready to jump on my crazy ideas. Where Brilliant Earth, converting their whole line to Fairmind might be a little bit more challenging, and it's easier to throw, a kind of a chunk of money at it instead of converting the whole line. So, again, I think that flexibility is really great for the smaller businesses.
And you can do both.
Well, I want to thank the conference for letting us talk about silver. Thank you to the audience for letting us talk about it. And thank you, panelists. Really appreciate it.